Guys, we have got crone bombs and breaking news all over the place. There are a ton of rosters that are either expected to form or are expected to stay together as we head into the 2022 CDL campaign in Vanguard. In this video, we're going to break it all down, look at the prospective teams that are forming, how do they match up against some of the other top 4, top 5, top 6 squads, what the outlook looks like heading into the year, and where they might be able to get towards the end of the year. We're going to break it all down, but first, if you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos that come out throughout Roster Mania. Leave a like as it really helps out the channel. But without further ado, let's get into just some general housekeeping material. First of all, Florida is expected to part ways, or is parting ways, with their head coach Ricky Atura. So we'll see what happens with Florida. The news, or at least the way things look right now, is that they still have Awakening in Skies, but there's the potential that Neptune is not there. There's the potential that they don't have any SMGs, at least right now, to fill out their roster. So will be interesting to see what happens with Florida. I can't wait to see what happens there. They're a big question mark for me. Paris, out of nowhere, is keeping their coach Theory. So I do think it's a good move, but the Paris spot seems to be up in the air all over the place. Not quite sure if they're coming back. Not quite sure if they're going to sell their league spot. Not quite sure what's going on with their trademarks, for goodness sake. So we'll see what's going on with Paris. But they did name that their coach will be retained. And heading into the first squad, this is one that we kind of expected, basically had correct on our graphic, is that of the London Royal Ravens. So of course, Afro is sticking around from last year. That isn't news at all. But though they're going to be building around Afro with Zero, Nasty, and Gizmo. Again, that's who we had on our board, so that's to kind of be expected. And if a couple of those names aren't familiar to you, namely, if you're looking at Nasty and Gizmo, those two played together basically throughout the entirety of Black Ops Cold War in the EU AM scene. If we look at their placings, you can look from top to bottom. They ended on this Atlas roster. They started on Orgless, and just look over at the left, a ton of first, second, first, so on and so forth. I mean, they were basically mopping up the challenger scene over in EU. So if I'm London, I think this is a great place to start. I'm not sure if they're going to compete with the top 6, 7, 8 teams, but I think that they're going to be more consistent than they were last year, and I think that's a great place to start. Moving on, let's take a peek at the Seattle roster, and this one also kind of makes sense. There's a couple pieces that we thought would be here, but there's one big one here that might be a bit of a surprise, and that's that Accuracy is expected to lead the AMs here in Sib, Mac, and Pred. Mac, of course, is not an AM. He's been around on NYSL a couple of years, but still, it's a bit surprising. And if you're Seattle, I think this makes total sense. I think you're taking a veteran with a ton of leadership and has been around the scene a bunch, and you're putting around some pretty lethal firepower when it comes to Sib, Mac, and Pred. The only thing is what's going to happen with roles here, because from what we've seen, at least the last couple years, this is very AR heavy, but I think that they'll get it figured out as you head into the next Vanguard season. So I'm excited to see what Seattle is doing here. It'll be interesting to see how this team ends up forming as the year goes on. Next squad, and this is just real quick, Toronto is expected to stick together. Thank goodness. I'm happy that they're not going anywhere when it comes to Toronto. The only big question mark was Kleenex, and will he be poached by any of those other big squads that were super close to competing with the Atlanta FaZe? Maybe he'd chase a bag, try to go somewhere else. I'm happy that he is staying. So I look forward to seeing what Toronto does next year, how many of the majors or how many major championships they can win, because I think other than Atlanta, at least right now, they're still probably second on my power rankings or projected power rankings. Moving on, another squad here, and this is kind of the big news, is LAG. So it seems they're rebuilding around Slasher. That makes total sense to me. If you look at the ARs that are out there, you have Clay, you have CRIM, And then you have like methods, accuracy, slasher. Other than Clay and CRIM, I would go towards slasher. I think this is a great move, and they're potentially targeting Huke, Gunless, and Asim to play alongside him. And this, to me, makes total sense. You get your main AR flex duo here with Slasher and Gunless, two players that just want to work. Forget the drama. Throw it all out the door. We just want to go in and try to make waves this next season. So I love that pairing. That is also exactly what Huke needs. So when you talk about the pieces and parts on this squad, you add Huke, and now you have a top 5 talent in the CDL as long as he can stay focused throughout the entirety of the year, especially at the beginning of last year in Black Ops Cold War. He was really the league MVP until he ended up getting dropped by Dallas and things went south. And oh, by the way, you have one of the most consistent SMGs over the last couple years in Asim. Asim was absolutely fantastic last year on NYSL. Maybe he trailed off a little bit towards the end of the year, but still Asim stock in Black Ops Cold War really rose as the year went on. So I can't wait to see how this team ends up playing if they do in fact form. This is a squad that I think can compete. And 2 other quick notes here. Does seem like this is correct in what we've been saying now for a few days. CRIM 6 eyeing reunion with Clayster. Neptune is also actively on their radar. And that would pair those 3 alongside Hydra. And as long as you have a 2 AR, 2 SMG meta, this squad could be absolutely disgusting. Are they top 3? We'll see. Are they top 5 or top 6? That's all to be determined. But this is a huge storyline going into next season. And last but not least, the Rocker are expected to stick together. So I got my Rocker jersey on. Really happy about this. I was a little bit put off, or I was a little bit anxious to see what might happen with Standy. Because if you want to compete with the Torontos, with the Atlantas, with those other top squads in the CDL, you need a top tier SMG, and that is Standy. So I thought maybe some of those other orgs out there that didn't quite have that, namely an Optic before the news of the merger, might try to work towards Standy, but seems like he's sticking with Rocker. And man, I can't wait to continue working with Rocker and following this squad into next season. So as we go ahead and switch over, let's just start with where we started earlier. So we look at the London Royal Ravens. We did have these 3 here basically the entire time. The only person that we are missing is Gizmo. So now we can take Gizmo, we can slide him in here, and it looks like this will be the squad that London rolls with. Again, will they compete with top 6, top 5? Sure, I think that they can compete. Will they consistently be top 3, top 4, top 5 in power rankings? I don't know. You look towards the top half of this graphic here, and there are some absolutely loaded squads. So we'll see what happens, but I do think this is a great start for them. Second squad that we talked about was Seattle, and we did see kind of the cryptic tweets from Paul X that says, fine, I'm mind blown, but I'll just run them again next year. And he's probably talking about his time in Challengers. So Paul X is off the board. Over here on the left side of our open players, these were the main ARs that I had that I think could probably lead up a squad. So methods, Shawnee, accuracy. Does seem as though accuracy is getting his chance. So accuracy and Mac, I think that could be a pretty dangerous duo. I think Mac has shown a ton of consistency over the last couple years. And then you get Pred also slotted in here. You get Sib slotted in here. Not quite sure as of right now that the roles work out for Seattle, but I do think that they'll have better placings throughout the entirety of the year this year than they did last year, just based off of how well they'll work together and how well they'll be prepared heading into a lot of their matches next season. Now, the big news of the day, let's look at this LAG roster. I thought maybe Pristini would stick alongside Gunless. Doesn't quite seem that is happening. So at this point, you got Slasher, you have Gunless, and again, you look at the flex AR duos that you see across this graphic. I think these guys can compete with a ton of them. Probably not Arcides and Celium, probably not Insight and Cammy, but other than that, I think that they're pretty solid here, and you know that they're going to be all about the work. So I love those two sticking together. Now, what are they missing? They're missing a superstar SMG, which on paper, or at least rumored, is going to be Huke. And again, we saw last year with Huke just how dangerous he can be. And then the only other person that you're missing is that entry, that route man, and that could be Asim. And if this roster comes together, I feel like they have all the pieces and parts that are needed. Again, I don't know if they have the firepower to hang with some of those top squads, but I think this is a really good, solid option here. The only other squad to talk about is that proposed squad of Neptune going to NYSL up here. Again, we did have Neptune there, so this isn't more or less a surprise, but what might be surprising is what Florida does from here, because if you look down underneath, a lot of the top SMGs in the league have already been snatched up, right? At this point in time, who are they going to get? Are they going to get a Pristini or maybe an Apathy, or I guess Draza could potentially be somebody that they trade for? I mean, there are still some names out there, but I think if you want to compete with some of these top squads, you're trying to compete with Shotzi and Scump and Attach and Standy and Kleenex and Bance and Simp and Abizi. I mean, those are incredible duos, and you don't quite have one of your SMGs yet. I think the road ahead for Florida could get tough. But as we look at our board, it seems like a ton of the question marks are starting to get filled in. What's going on with Paris? We'll find that out. What else is Florida going to do? And then what happens with that other league spot when it comes to the spot that's vacated by either Optic or Dallas, however you want to go ahead and put it. So a ton of question marks still, but I think the league gets a bit more clear based off of what we have in front of us. So down in the comments, let me know, how do you feel about these bottom three squads who seem to be making moves? Do you think that they can compete at least at times with some of those top squads? Maybe LAG, if all things go well, is that squad that could potentially break into the top 5, top 6 or so? In the comments, let me know. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Anytime there's breaking news, we're here talking about it. So thank you so much for watching another episode. Leave a like if you don't mind. And with that, we'll catch you in the next Roster Mania video.